President.
It's okay, Carla.
Okay.
Please continue.
Right. I will. Okay. I'm Carla Lane. I'm FGDLA's Vice President for the Higher Education Sector and the moderator for today's webinar. FGDLA is a nonprofit professional association formed to promote the development and application of distance learning in the federal government. We actively foster collaboration and understanding among those involved in leveraging technology and instructional media in supporting the education and training needs of the federal government. FGDLA is a chapter of the United States Distance Learning Association. Our membership is derived primarily from individuals employed by the agencies within the federal government. We invite you to join with us in this exciting field. Our web address is FGDLA.us. This is the second in a series of 6 new webinars. To give you a taste of what we have planned, our next webinar is on March 16th. Mary Kate Dougherty, she is the Executive Institute's Director at the Treasury Department, will be presenting on strategies to develop leaders virtually. Helen Chamberlain, who is an expert in Section 508, will focus on accessibility for distance learning, and that's on April 21st. The 5th webinar is on May 26th and features Dr. Jonathan Peterson Tensha. He specializes in developing gaming for training and for education. The webinar series concludes on June 23rd with Diamond Systems, a firm that specializes in instructional design and development. All of the sessions are at 2 p.m. Eastern. We'd like to thank Zoom and Russ Colbert, or sometimes called Colbert.
You're welcome, Carla.
Even in sponsoring today's meeting and seminar. We could not ask for a better sponsor and partner in advancing distance learning. Thank you so much, Russ.
Thank you, Carla. A pleasure to be with you today.
We're so happy you are. The topic today is the future of the organization, adaptive learning. Our presenter is Dr. Fran Kassinger. She's accumulated 51 years, and I don't know how, in the field of education, first as a public school teacher and librarian, followed by 13 years in the U.S. Air Force as the Chief Learning Officer. She was the administrator for 5 of DoD's overseas dependent schools, in addition to leading several not-for-profits. Today, Dr. Kassinger manages a training team in the Department of the Treasury. She is the recipient of many awards related to distance learning, including several proudly from FGDLA. She has published and spoken nationally and internationally on the topic. Her passion continues to be creating new avenues for acquiring knowledge for the reluctant learner. Dr. Kassinger, welcome, and thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Carla. And I am honored and excited to work with you all today. Before I begin, I want to share a story with you. And you may have heard it before, but if not, it has a message at the end. And that is that a teacher was standing before her class one day. She was teaching about positive self-image. And she said to the class, if you feel dumb, stand next to your desk. She was greatly relieved that none of her students stood up by their desk until young Billy in the back stood up. She was horrified. She had to quickly abate the situation and said to Billy, Billy, you don't really think you're dumb, do you? Without a moment's pause, Billy said, no, ma'am, but I didn't want you standing by yourself. Despite the humor and the sweetness of that story, the message that I want to send to you is, don't leave me here by myself. I'm going to share knowledge, but there are strategic times during the presentation that I'm going to invite you to also share your experience and knowledge and ideas. And I hope that you will participate, because together we will learn more about the topic that Carla identified a few minutes ago, from adoptive to adaptive learning, and what's in store for our future learning organizations. So without further ado, I will start the presentation. So let's see, sharing the screen. Share. All right, we're off and running. So okay, it's not moving.
We can see your screens, Fran, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm trying, there it goes. Okay, so these are the topic areas that I want to address, but before I get to them, I want to explain to you why I selected this topic and why I divided it up in these 3 areas. back in March of 2020, all of us had an upheaval probably in our educational and training programs, our professional development activities, because all of a sudden we were quarantined, forced quarantined by COVID-19. I know in my own training team, we sat down and we're trying to adapt some of our face-to-face brick and mortar classroom environments into an environment that could be transferred to the virtual world or the remote learning situations. We had challenges before us because most of our training delivery, our products and services are delivered online, but there was a small group of people that we served that refused to work online, and we still had to support them. So here we were doing a change management with them and their attitudes towards distance learning, as well as having to quickly redesign the materials we had for them for the classroom into the webinar. But that brought up some questions and started creating some grayness in our future, grayness in the fact that it became a little bit foggy. One of the questions that one of the team leaders asked was, what sort of technology should we invest in to enhance their learning experience, to make it more engaging, and to make them, these people that were traditionalists, really buy into online learning? Well, that's a good question, because at the end of December 2020, there is a CBI, a CB Insight marketing assessment report that said that $4.9 billion was invested in 2020 alone in new technologies. That means out there, there are 4.9 million, excuse me, I said million, I meant billion, dollars worth of applications and new infrastructures and new delivery systems, online course templates that we could select from, which ones would work. And one of the metrics has to be which ones would serve us the longest. But that raises the question, what's in our future? Where do we go to from here in distance learning? So I decided about that time that we had to get some answers in order to support our customers. Simultaneously, Carla asked me if I'd present a topic for this webinar series. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'm going to research answers to our questions and share the discoveries with you. And so that's what I'm doing today. I'm doing it from the in three segments, from the adaptive learning, and then I'm going to move to adaptive learning and what's next. But as you see in each of those three segments, there is a third bullet that opens the door for you to share your knowledge and ideas, because I'm still learning, I'm still discovering. But I'm hoping that what I share with you today will leave you with one message, and that is that our role as organizational trainers and educators and professional developers is in a revolutionary state. The technologically driven revolution calls for us to rethink how we do business and why we do the business of learning. So with that introduction, I am ready to begin. All right, this period that I'm going to be talking about is the origins of formal learning. It set the stage for where we are today. And I personally named it adoptive learning because adoption means taking on a relationship. It's not adjusting to a relationship, it's assuming the role of a relationship. And here on this slide, I give you examples that have nothing to do with education. But I wanted to get the paradigm across to you, the concept, or rather the construct across, that when we are talking about adaptive learning in the next 20 minutes or so of this hour presentation, I am talking about a perpetuation of the role of the teacher, perpetuation of the role of the learner, and perpetuation of the learning model that existed and the relationship that existed between the instructor and the learner and the environment in which they worked in. So I have taken the liberty to use this word, and you will hear it again and again in a few minutes. So the formation of the adaptive learning path is what we're going to look at first. And it began in the stands of the Middle East. Oops, excuse me. I have some notes here I am referring to, so I won't forget. And Mesopotamia. Now, this is a map created in the 17th century of Mesopotamia. And one of the, two of the elements that you'll notice here are the rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers. And in fact, Mesopotamia is a Greek word meaning the land between the rivers. If you go back 10,000 years ago, the hunter and gatherers were moving, they were a little bit nomadic. They would follow the herds and they would plant and cultivate along the way. But they didn't really settle in large areas until they reached this particular area in the Middle East. Today, that area is Iraq with segments of Syria and Iran and a little bit of Turkey. So you can kind of envision the landscape that these hunter and gatherers started to migrate towards in larger and larger populations. Till about 3,700 before the Common Era, BCE, they had created the first world urban area, hallmarked by institutions and social activities that we know today that are in our larger cities. For instance, the architects started taking different visual bases. The social classes began to have an upper and a lower and a slightly middle class as the populations grew. Leadership developed into a royal leadership, and we will talk about that in a few minutes. Trade was the main market rather than anything else in this new urban area back in the 37 BCE era. The Samaritans were the first to populate that area, followed by the Arcadians. And they got along fine, but they did trade among each other. And one way that they managed to trade with each other was to imprint on this little tablet that they created with the dry sands of the Mesopotamia earth and the waters from the Tigris and Euphrates. They would mix them together, it would harden, and they would imprint a symbol on that tablet and it would harden, and they would attach that hardened little tablet to the product that they were trading. And this would identify their property from their neighbor's property. It was just a little tablet at the time. And it was, the emblems could be an X, it could be a circle, it could just be a squiggly note, but it was a brand for that tradesman. And this was not lost on this guy, Sunkar. Sunkar was one of the early royal leaders of the Mesopotamia area that had turned into an urban environment. He had scribes, which was the fourth echelon of the royalty. And those scribes at that time were actually not called scribes, they were called ummiyas. But regardless, their mission in life was to circulate the rules to the growing population in the Mesopotamia area. And in turn, they were supposed to report back to Sunkar what they learned from these populations, what was going on in town, who was having babies, who was doing trade, who was looking at building a new building, because Sunkar needed to know this, right? If he was going to rule and manage. But he noticed the scribes reported about the tradesmen and how they were using these little tablets with what we call cuneiforms today, imprinted impressions on these clay, the soft clay that would harden. And Sunkar decided, well, this would be a way for the scribes to get out the message, whether it's my laws, rules, or what's happening in the community. And so he mandated that they start imprinting his messages, his laws, and stories that he wanted to pass through the community circles onto larger clay tablets. And so they did, but that was only half the battle. People had to understand what those clay tablets said. And at this point, only the scribes understood them because they came up with the symbols and they had to agree what the symbols meant. But then they had to teach others what they meant so that they could interpret what these tablets said. So they couldn't teach everybody. It was a vast I mean, there are over, at this point in time, 60, 70,000 people that occupied the area. And so what they did was they selectively grouped the wealthier people, the tradesmen that had made more money and the king had favor with, into the temples and said, we're going to show you what these symbols mean. And you are going to then tell the people that work for you what they mean, and they will tell their families. And that's how we'll cascade down information. Well, as we know from one of the remaining tablets, that process was a lengthy process because there are a lot of symbols communicating a lot of information for a short period of time that these people had to rapidly learn, but often didn't quickly learn. And one of the tablets even suggested that if they learned it accurately, they were rewarded by King Sankar, but if they weren't, they were lashed and whipped. So early behaviorism here, but nevertheless, that was the first formal educational setting that we have. That's the origin of who we are today. They had a central place for a select group of people to have interpretation of a source of knowledge. And that interpretation was done by a subject matter expert, and omnia means expert. The place that they gathered was it's EDU, Eduma, I believe, Edumana, and that meant gathering place. So the gathering place, or excuse me, it did not, it meant the temple house. So instead of schoolhouse, it was temple house. So temple house with the omnia, the expert, using a resource to teach. And that model lasted for 213 generations afterwards. And today, our brick and mortar face-to-face classrooms have that same model. This shows you how.
So Fran,
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? If the central place is where kind of everything started, and you talked about the use, especially in the 18th century, of tablets, is that why we call our devices like iPads and our tablets that we use? Is that the origin? Did it go back that far?
Well, you know, oh my goodness, that's such an interesting question. Possibly so, but you know, we have the notebook tab, we had the hard back tablets, paper tablets that we used in the 1950s and 60s before the computers. So the idea of things being collected in one source gave it tabs, or gave it, you know, reiterations of paper, or lengthy, you know, scripts on the clay tablets. So it's possible that that originated from that concept, but certainly there's a parallel there of having a resource. Good question.
Thank you for that answer, Fran.
No, that was tap dancing around. But if you look at the top row of graphics here, you'll see in front of you how this was perpetuated, this model, a central source, whether in Mesopotamia, as you see there, people learning to do something in mass. Then you look at the Greek slave teaching the Roman children in a central place. And again, we'll see that it's a select group that are taught, not everybody. Here you see a priest teaching parishioners in the Middle Ages. And then you see the Shifu in China teaching the village, the richer village children. And then the Aztec, they had schools too, and they taught in classes. There is a group that would learn one thing that was from the upper class, and then you had the lower class learning trade. This generated, as you see on the bottom row of graphics, throughout history, repeated consistently, the sage on the stage model. The expert teaching the non-expert in a centralized place. And unfortunately, until the 1800s, a select group, a select class of people had the privilege of learning from these experts. One of the aspects of this that I find particularly interesting is that even today, if you say that somebody's an expert or somebody of authority said something, our mind goes back to what have they published, or where is their source of information? Even now, I suspect some of you are Googling some of this You want to find the source of truth, just as the tablet was the source of truth. And a good illustration of this is, do you remember the book called Yes, Virginia? And it talked about, what was her name? Virginia O'Hamlin, asking Papa if there was a Santa. And Papa said if she wrote the sun, and the sun said there was a Santa, then there was a Santa Claus. Again, going back to a source, a truth that people could standardize their own knowledge against. And in our classrooms today, our brick and mortar classrooms, we don't ask people to Google. We have an expert come in and they are the source of knowledge. They have a tablet or a notebook that, edifies the fact that they are truly the authority on that bit of knowledge. And as you see in the bottom, this has gone on for 25 centuries. That model is hard to die because with each generation, they adopted what their parents had done and what their forebears had done because it worked for them, for the most part. And you see here, there's commonalities regardless of where in the world this occurred, because after Mesopotamia, Egypt, China, and other areas followed. Southern Mexico and upper level of Guatemala also instituted very like formal settings of an expert teaching non-experts with a source of knowledge and a central place. And also what is of importance here is that whatever was taught for the benefit of a higher authority. Just like Sankar needed people to obey his laws, subsequent generations provided education for younger people through adults to better the society they lived in, to perpetuate the mores, to ensure that laws were understood. It was always for a different cause other than the student themselves. And another interesting thing here is, again, this was not always a process of learning for everybody. It was typically for a select group of people until we got to the late 1800s. Here again are illustrations of how this was perpetuated. You see in the lower right-hand corner, the colleges. You see over right above that, the early public school educations started in Massachusetts here in the United States. They had the authority figure with people listening dutifully to them. And this continued even when we started remote learning on television. You had the authority figure in the television or on the radio giving information, giving quote unquote truth to those that wanted to know it. In our classrooms today, if we have the webinars, you have a person such as myself presenting information, claiming to be the source of that total knowledge package and presenting it to you. So and my purpose today is not necessarily the purpose that Sankar had to support the government. The purpose has changed, and we'll get to that in a minute, but the process is slow to change. Now, there were cracks in the system, and I gleaned some of these cracks from different periodicals that I'll share with you in a minute. But one of them was, because the process was solidified over the generations, it did not adjust to the learner. The learner had to adjust to it. And as a result, it didn't fit everybody's means of learning. In fact, people that would pay to go in there, businesses that would pay their skilled workers to go in there to be educated on a different process, didn't get the return on investment that they were always looking for. The students and learners themselves would drop out mentally if they didn't drop out physically, because it didn't meet their needs. They were lost. And the value that it had for the higher authorities then didn't materialize, because some of the learners dropped out, the money was lost, the operations couldn't continue because the education wasn't there to support it. The motivation was often lacking because, again, the learning process and purpose was not adjusted. The learner had to adjust to it. And ultimately, we had some learning outcomes that were not desirable. And on the bottom here, you see some of the periodicals or online sources that I gleaned those cracks in. But academia realized it too, that there were cracks. And so here you see that academia was reading newspapers as we read. And I just randomly grabbed these articles online that say the source of their business problems was the training, the formal training that originated in Mesopotamia that we kept perpetuating over the centuries. Poor training. And we know why. There have been umpteen thousand studies, exaggeration noted, but nevertheless, many people have studied the reasons why. And it goes back to the process was not adjustable for the learner. And if you had to get down to one of the core reasons, it was that reason. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, wait a minute. Over time, there are people like Maria Montessori, Carl Rogers, even Socrates that had different approaches. Yes, they did, but they did not. Now, Maria Montessori school did endure, but most of the theorists that came up with great alternatives to the formal setting, one way, one say approach, didn't last. Their theories were entertained for a while, but they didn't work for one reason or another for a longer period of time. We just kept regenerating what Mesopotamia had introduced to us long ago in the Middle East sands. Even John Dewey, one of our foremost psychologists, educational psychologists, he says here, as you read, that the purpose of education has always been to everyone, in essence, to give the young the things they need in order to develop orderly, sequential way into members of society. But then he goes on to say, and education is, in its forms and methods, an outgrowth of the needs of society. So ultimately, it's something else that we educate the human being for, or did for many, many years, not for the human's own self-actualization. There were attempts, but it never lasted. So the adopted learning may not be the right model anymore. Before I get to the next topic, I want to open the door to get your ideas. So Russ, I cannot see if there's anything in the chat box, but if people can unmute themselves and ask questions or share information or experiences about the early models of learning, it would add to our understanding of how it impacted you
Fran,
and your life. Yes.
Fran, may I suggest this? The best way for the webinar attendees to talk with us is to use the Q&A icon. So the question and answer icon, if they just are free to type anything in there that they choose, and I'll be monitoring that for you. And thank you very much for suggesting this.
No, Russ, thank you. I love Zoom. Love it. It's not like our web, the application that we use in our business.
Thank you, Fran.
So any questions?
There are currently no questions, but I will keep monitoring it. And if you don't mind, I'll just wait for you to pause. And when the questions come in, Fran, I'll just let you know what they are.
Perfect. All right, then I think we'll move on then to the next section of our presentation. So hold on one second, let me get adjusted here again. All right, so we'll come out with thoughts. Well, the cracks that I identified earlier are some of many. And people, even in the 20th century, were getting a little bit restless, knowing that all the attempts of all these innovative psychologists and educators was not creating a permanent path to a different way of learning. And so in the 1950s, it just so happened that technology was coming into play, and it met and married an idea by a person that I will identify in a minute. But right now, I'm going to call this period of time where technology met a new educational path the adaptive learning model. And in fact, there is an academic definition for adaptive learning that I'll share momentarily. But the roots of that adaptive was that there was a change in structure and function and behavior by an individual to improve that chance of survival in a specific environment. That's a general definition. You'll find it anywhere. Non-teaching examples, you adapt to the code or you adapt to the COVID-19 environment. And teaching examples, you adapt instructional materials to the learner's needs. You can adapt the environment to ADA requirements. So adaptation is different from adoption. Adoption, you assume the structure. Adaptation is adapting the structure to the person who wants to use it. There's quite a difference there. And in adaptive learning that we are now getting into, we did find a means to start a new path for our learning processes. And that was initiated by, what was this? Burrus Frederick Skinner, better known as B.F. Skinner, who developed the teaching machine. And what B.F. Skinner realized was that students were robotically going through a process and dropping out if they didn't get it. And he was a behaviorist, published over 200 periodicals and some books on his principle of reinforcement. Now, behind all of that was B.F. Skinner did not believe in free will. He believed that that was an illusion. What he did believe, though, is a prior action determines what you do subsequent to that action. So if you have a positive experience, you're likely to stay with that experience. But if you have a negative experience, you'll shut down. And so if a person had a negative experience in a learning environment, they would shut down. But if they had a positive one, he said, they would continue. And he said, in fact, the purpose of learning should be not only to provide the content, but to create a love of learning. Think of the difference this was making. This was saying to you that it's not just to satisfy a higher authority, but we also have to consider the learner themselves. And we have to change the environment, change the process where they will continue loving learning. And so he created what we call today the teaching machine. Now, you may not recognize it because this was an early edition. This was the first edition. And I have a link here to show you how it was explained to the population back in 1950. Russ, do you want to click on the link where everybody can see it and hear it?
You do it, please,
Okay,
if you
all
would,
right.
Fran.
Let's see if it works here.
And when you're ready, we do have our first question.
Okay, so let me, I don't know if this is going to play or not. It's saying blank. Oh, I need an app to open it. It's not going to work.
Oh, shucks.
All right.
I was very interested in the teaching machine.
Well, copy down the URL. It's worth seeing. It will take you back to another place in time. But it was built on that model of chunking the information, guiding a person through one chunk at a time, and giving them positive feedback. And if they didn't get it the first time, they would change the approach on how they would support that learner getting through the material that the learner's peers were getting through the traditional method. So let me stop here and take the question that Russ, you said you had.
Fran, one of our attendees thinks that the adaptive learning method is very, very interesting, and it happened so long ago. But they ask, how long do you think it will take for a person to have a different mindset closer toward this adaptive learning model?
Really nice question. Thank you for asking. You know, the adaptive learning model is taking over the adaptive learning approach in great speed and just unimaginative ways that I'm going to share with you in the last part of this presentation. But as far as how long it will take, I think there will always be people that prefer that face-to-face interaction, and they don't want anything between them and another human being. But as the generations, our millennials are having Generation A that never knew anything but technology. It's part of their family. It's part of their DNA, if you will. So I think as Generation A matures, they're now preschool and kindergarten, but as they move up through the ranks, I think the adoptive learning approach will be history. So it will take another generation to get there, I'm sure, at least. And there'll always be somebody that says, I wonder what it would be like to be with a human to learn. Maybe we'll go back. But the process is one thing, the purpose also. The purpose of learning for self-actualization in addition or instead of a higher authority is right now in the bridge with this learning teaching machine. And I'll show you how we're moving towards away from doing it for authority and doing it for self. But right now, are there any more questions, Russ, or should I move on?
Please move on, Fran. I think we do have a couple more questions, but I'm talking to the people, and so let's. I suggest we continue with this interesting presentation, Fran. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. All right. So the adaptive learning was technologically based, no doubt there. But for us distance learning advocates, this was kind of the beginning of when we emerged into the learning process. But what's really neat is you see, if you follow the numbers here, that it takes the learner first and figures out who the learner is, and then adjusts the material so the learner can absorb it and retain it. Such a fascinating idea rather than the learner having a one-way track with the adaptive learning model. Look at this time chart is probably a little bit hard to read, and I apologize for that. I had to copy and paste it from a publication. But you see, if nothing else, how in the middle of it, where you start having the teaching machine, things start rapidly entering into other ways that technology can support learning. And it was all with the idea of supporting the learner, not necessarily an authoritative figure. It was how can we get the learner to engage more in the learning process. Here are some historical views from the 1970s, and I say historical, to current times, of different applications that have used that first adaptive learning model and made it into a business model that they now sell. Dreambox, Newton, and Carnegie Math all use adaptive learning approaches. What is it the learner needs? How can they move ahead? And they do this by algorithms that are built into the infrastructure of these IT-driven learning process systems. And some of you all may be familiar with some of the algorithms, but there's, I'm trying to think of some of the name of them now, but one of them, algorithm that's built in today is determining the distance between the learner's perception of a discrete object and the actual distance. So it's a learner looking at, oh, that's history, and I'm just gonna kind of physically back away because that bores me. You're measuring that distance between the learner getting close to the computer and backing away to assess whether they're interested or not, and they adapt the material. That's how discrete our adaptive learning technologies have become and understanding the learner. There's another algorithm that determines the pace of learning, and that algorithm it's set up to determine how fast the learner can absorb and respond to questions accurately. If it's quicker, they move the reading quicker. If it's slower, they start supporting it with different objects like micro-learning objects or YouTube, like a YouTube video or a chat box to say, hey, do you need some help? But again, the learner is the center of this approach, which is beautiful. Here are some examples before a class, assessing the learner's abilities. And again, we used to have pre-assessments in our own education about, do you like this? Do you like this or not like this? Or do you consider yourself a visual learner, even though it's not such a thing? But If they put down their perceptions of self, they were entered into the algorithm so that then the learning process would adapt to it. This is during the class. And I mentioned the chat box. We use this in our own training environments. You could have a training buffet of preferences of ways to learn. I don't want to go through the online course. I'd rather have the cryptic or the cliff notes of it, or I'd rather have just a YouTube tell me. So you have choices of how you're going to get the knowledge from the source of knowledge. The adaptive learning model, the adaptive learning model is getting publicity. Even after now 70 years, it has traction, and it has been an impetus for a massive amount of technology innovations. And oh my goodness, I wish I could show you this particular link. Perhaps we can put it in the chat room or the Q&A area, Russ, where they can copy it and look at it. It is a beautiful description, though commercially made, of what adaptive learning is, and it will get you excited about it. I have no stock. I don't know any employee. I have never met anybody with Area 9, but I have to tell you, they captured it in a nutshell that's beautifully done. And so if this URL can be shared with people, Russ, I think it would be beneficial for them to see it. I wish I could show it to you now. I plan to, but apparently I can't. So let me move on.
We'll get it posted, Fran. We'll get it posted.
Thank you so much. What would you do without a person like Russ, right?
Oh, and Carla as well.
Carla, oh yes, Carla, you got me into this. All right, so, oops, let me go forward here. All right, so the continuing purpose of education since ancient time has been to bring people to the full realization as possible to what it is to be a human being. But why? For somebody else's use of that human being's capability. If you see where I highlighted below, the purposes of hierarchy are limited in scope. They don't allow the purpose of learning to be self-actualization for self-purposes. And this was written in 1991. It is such a paradox because adaptive learning is changing the process, but it didn't necessarily, even today, change the purpose. But stand by, the purpose is about to change as well. So let me stop here. Are there any questions about adaptive learning approach as opposed to the adaptive learning approach? Russ, any questions?
Hey, Fran, can you please speak to the extent to which the ongoing emergence of content management systems to learning management systems as micro learning factors into how does that fit into this adaptive learning model?
Well, the learning management systems have curriculums that are derived from a higher authority or seniority for the purposes of serving a mission or serving a business need or serving the government's need in the general public area. You know, public schools teaching mores and practices and beliefs of what the government wants them to have. So LMSs can provide a wealth of resources that could be used by a learner at whim and will. And if that is the way that they access those resources, then it does serve the individual learner. But the material is already preset, right? So if a learner wants to learn about how to build a Corvette and they go into an LMS to seek information about that, so the way the material is designed is inflexible. It's already written on the tablet, if you will. It is there for prosperity. However, if the learner is self-motivated, they can use it as a resource to look for things that they need as an adult learner goes in to get only what they need, and they selectively choose what to read, what to retain. Then they go to another source to make their inventory of information larger, and is doing their self-research to build a repository of information about building that Corvette or doing whatever they want to do. But an LMS doesn't adjust. It offers materials that don't adjust. It's the learner that has to adjust the materials for themselves. So it's the learner that would make it adaptive, but LMS does not. I hope that answered that question.
There's several questions regarding learning management systems, Fran. How have the ways that learning management systems have evolved in both academic and corporate settings impacted how we continue to evolve adaptive learning today?
Well, the learning management system, quite frankly, was set up to be a more efficient distribution system of learning resources. So to make it more than that is really an organization's ability to adapt it for a different purpose. And it can be adapted. It can be used as a library that an individual learner goes in to select resources, as I described earlier, and use them as part of their knowledge building towards a self-defined goal. But if a curriculum's assigned, it no longer is adaptive for two reasons. One, the curriculum was decided upon for the federal agency or the business need or the federal government's need. So it's somebody else's need who developed the curriculum. Another reason it wouldn't be adaptive is because the material is already pre-organized the way it's going to be delivered. And if I go in to take a course and I don't feel comfortable with how that course is being conveyed to me, I still have to stick with the course if it's assigned to me. Alternatively, I can pick and choose what I want to out of that course or select a different method if it's available to me in the LMS. As long as the learner has control of why they're learning and how they're learning, it's adaptive. But once a system or a business takes control, as an LMS is, it becomes less adaptive.
Fran, that's a great answer. That's very clear for me. We have one question from one of Carla's students, and that is this conference being recorded? And absolutely yes. And just about an hour after the conclusion of Fran's presentation, we'll have this stored on the Federal Government Distance Learning Association's website, is where you can find that. And also we have a comment from the IRS, Kelly, and he indicates, or they indicate that they manage the microlearning videos at the IRS, Fran. And that is a very impressive video library, and it's searchable. And they're available 24/7 whenever an employee needs assistance. And they currently have over 540 videos and building that number. So that was just a comment. Back to you, Fran.
Oh, Kelly, I applaud that. And I'm impressed with such an inventory. Wow, what a resource for the IRS folks to have access to. The key here is, though, if it's going to be adaptive, where it's customized for the learner always has to have freedom to choose which ones to take, and they would be based off of the content that's needed for their end goal and the process in which they can learn that content. So as long as you keep that in mind, you are absolutely right smack in the middle of adaptive learning modeling. Good for your IRS.
And Kelly
Right.
also talks about their SHOTS program, Fran, and how they've moved from traditional training and education to online self-help tutorials, what they call the SHOTS program. Just a comment. I'm sorry. Back to you.
No, I'm glad. No, I tell you, IRS, they are very innovative and very comprehensive in the way they approach training. They're part of Treasury, and so I'm very familiar, not very familiar, but I'm slightly familiar with what they do over there in IRS. And again, as long as there's freedom for the learner to pick and choose, it's right there for adaptive learning. But that brings us to, where do we go to from here? If we move from the adaptive learning to adaptive learning, what's next? And so I want to share with you some things that are happening right now that are in prototype stage, not in an imaginary world. It's prototype, and it's also on some blueprints for the next 9 years, 20 years, and 50 years beyond. And that technology, though not created as an educational technology, will be used in education as other technologies have been applied to our profession and now are called educational technologies because we adapted it to our purposes. So we already use gamification, microlearning, and virtual and augmented reality. That's not new. This is something that's been going on for about 10 years. The gamification being different from games themselves, but the idea of games used to enhance learning experiences and microlearning objects that can be repurposed and used for different things like chatbots. Augmented reality is really, it's made its heyday in the last 5 or 6 years with the federal government, I know, and stimulating engagement in the learning environment. The next thing, of course, is artificial intelligence, which is a little bit expensive right now, but it is the next wave of where we're going in the future. But that's in the near term. All of this is current and near term right now. Social media is out there. The problem with social media, though, is you can't say it's the source of truth. And that is a downfall of, you know, the tablet was the source of truth. The book was the source of truth. The sun was the source of truth about Santa Claus, I suppose. But social media, there's so many opinions that are considered facts, or distorted facts are socialized and, you know, magnified on social media that you don't know what the source of truth anymore. But here's the secret. Social media has a platform. It's a vehicle. And if controlled and managed well, it is another way of engaging learners to discuss openly and authentically about different ideas. And idea building is certainly a way of learning. Now, current predictions. I am going to show you in the next 5 slides rapidly some things that are in prototype or blueprint, and then I'm going to overlay it with a question about how can we apply it to educational technology. So get in for the futuristic ride here. Okay, so wait a minute. This is not the one. This is what I just said to you. Okay. Future, and I stole this from Future Timeline Net. All right, AI. I mentioned that by the end of this decade, 2029, we're going to be looking at using AI on a regular basis. Now, the Turing test, if you don't know it, well, here it is. It determines how human a robot can be. And so the idea that we would use artificial intelligence using a Turing test to see if it could replicate human behavior is not for science fiction or Hollywood anymore. It is happening now. So what does this mean for our educational technologies? Will these be our automated tutors? Will they be the ones that will go into the IRS repository and look for the right courses for us based off of their knowledge of us? There are so many ways that perhaps this can be used as an educational technology venture. Maybe they set the standard. Maybe they say, hey, you're off track with what you need to know for what purposes you established early on. Not far off, 2029. Here's another one, 2039. Full immersion into virtual reality. I have to tell you, I went to a leadership school in Disney about 20 years ago or so, and this was early 2000s, I believe. And at that time, Disney was prototyping where you would go in and sit with previous VIPs in history and interview them, and they would talk back to you based off of your questions. Now, that was all pre-programmed because the questions probably were the same from one interviewer to the next, and so they could anticipate and pre-program. But the idea that you felt that you were sitting there with Abraham Lincoln was amazing. I mean, it was just stunning how, you change your attitude towards learning when you're in the actual learning event. So this is happening. And is it a possibility for IVR to be used as a means to project us into another time in the future or in the past, to understand it better, to live it, to kind of do extrapolation? What if this variable had changed? Would the outcome had been different? And what would be the impact on us today? Or in the future, if those assumptions are not right, what will happen to that trajectory of that idea? So IVR, just 2 decades away. What does this mean for instructions, robots, automation, and 3D printing? Right now, we're not using them so much in the training world to enhance learning opportunities for the individual, but they are there for us to start using, possibly to manage our robots that are possibly going to be our tutors, or possibly design our courses for us, or distribute our learning materials. Who knows? 2040, it's in blueprint. Here's another one, virtual telepathy. Imagine, and this, I'm not making this stuff up. This is in publications, I promise you. But you have headsets that can determine, you know, what's going on that's not visual or not obvious to the eye. Imagine how much learning could take place in things that your mind filters out, but this brings into focus. One of my colleagues told me that she has a reoccurring nightmare of going into a store and picking a disc up saying, I want to be an engineer today. And she takes it to a place where they implant it into her mind and she becomes an engineer. Or on the next day, she wants to be a doctor. So they replace that disc with another disc. I mean, they place discs now for identity purposes. If you get lost, why not replace one of your mental synapses with this disc that creates a different view on the world? It's scary, and she has nightmares about it. I find it kind of exciting, actually, that this technology is out there and can increase our learning options to fill in the gaps. Here's one. If this doesn't frighten you, talk about having a bionic eye. You know, the bionic woman and men that they created in science fiction back in the 20th century. You can be that person by having this eye implanted into you that has cameras that can absorb more information, create augmented reality without having to put on a huge, heavy headset, and have Zoom capability when you need it. At all places, you can be on a mountaintop and look down into a house in its driveway with your eyes, not binoculars. So if this all sounds like, no, it's not going to happen, all of these that I selected are out there in blueprint and or prototype. They are in the making. The question is, when they're out there, how do we adapt it for the future? So let me get back to, these are processes, but the purpose of learning here is the individual. The self-actualization, be all you can be, to borrow an old Army recruiting slogan. If that's not possible for the human being, then the human being's purpose is no longer to thrive, because to thrive is to give, to feel value. And to feel value is to be able to create it, and to be able to create it is to be able to draw on resources that you have, the knowledge that you are given, the abilities emotionally and physically that you're enabled to do. So, future purpose of education, one thing is for certain, according to this individual, is it will have very little in common with what we have today. So that concludes this presentation. I hope that I have left you with the idea that we have got to start planning for the future, so that we're not caught in another March 2020 environment where we have to react rather than respond intelligently. So Russ, here I am. Any thoughts or questions posted?
Well, we had a lot of discussion. We had a few more queued up, Fran, but we'll try and answer them. Again, the recording will be posted at the Federal Government Distance Learning Association's website. Over to you, Carla, for closing.
Okay, Fran, I just wanted to add one thing. If anybody's looking for a house lately, if you go on realtor.com, they have 3D videos, and you can put on an AI headset and walk through a house with the headset on with just your computer and the headset. So what you're describing is already here to some extent. So thank you so very much for being with us today. What a great presentation, and the history of it and what we're all doing. It really adds to what we think about our lives and what we contribute to the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. And
Thank
that
you, Fran.
concludes our
Thank you, Carla.
webinar. Thank you. Good afternoon.